Uh, and Trustee Sickinga.
Present and no conflict of interest.
All right, we'll now move into approval of the agenda. Are there any edits, additions, or deletions to the agenda?
Well, I wondered, and I mentioned this to you about moving this from an action item to a discussion item, since we have not had this on our board yet as a discussion item. But Lonnie, you told me that that would be an immaterial difference. Because, yeah, but I prefer it as a discussion item since we have not had this on the board agenda yet.
Okay, so is that a motion to change number 6 to discussion?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Sickinga and seconded by Nolte. Is there any discussion? So just to clarify here, I think that, I'm fine with whatever we want to call it. I think we're going to hear from the public, and then we will have to make a decision about the recommendation from the Planning Commission, whether that is to then, get legal opinion, those kinds of things is certainly the option of the board. So I think either way, there will be some sort of action that results from tonight. But those motions are appropriate as a discussion item as well. Any other discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll move into a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. The motion carries. So item 6, just to clarify for everybody, item 6 is now, we'll now read discussion items. Are there any other motions regarding the agenda? All right, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Sickinga, seconded by Metz. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll move into a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. The motion carries. We'll now move into the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make that motion to approve it.
It's been moved by Nolte. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Metz. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. The motion carries. We'll now move into our call for public comment. Before we get started, I just want to take a second to extend my sincere thanks to both, all 3 of our township, DPZ, our planning consultants, and with a very special note of gratitude to the members of the Short-Term Rental Committee for their dedication and thorough work on this complex issue. Over the past several months, the committee has held 6 public meetings, reviewed more than a half dozen surveys from other Michigan municipalities, conducted our own community survey that received received 618 responses. They compared ordinances from 5 local jurisdictions and compiled their findings and recommendations into a detailed 53-page report, which was issued in May. The process reflects the many dimensions of short-term rentals, from housing and neighborhood impacts to economic, environmental, and enforcement considerations. The committee's work gives us a strong foundation to have an informed and thoughtful discussion as we consider the impacts of short-term rentals and what those impacts will be on Dexter Township. So I just wanted to make sure that I highlighted that and thanked everyone for their work as we head into the board's first public comment about short-term rentals. I want to remind everybody that public comment is not a question and answer period, so the board will not respond. If you'd like a response, we request that you sign in at the back and we will respond at a later time. And also to let everyone know that we will have a timer and we will be sticking with the 3-minute time limit. So Sam has some placards over here. There will be a 1 minute mark, and then the red will come up when it is time to end, and that's when I will ask you to cease your comments. We have a lot of folks, so we want to make sure we get through everyone. I also want to make sure that everybody knows, get all your comments in at once, because we only have one public comment period, and so everyone will have their chance to come to the microphone one time for their 3 minutes. And with that, the floor is the public's. So when you come up, we'll make sure that the microphone is on. please make sure you state your name and your address for the minutes, and then we will start your timer. Anyone who wishes to address the board, come on up.
Hello. Good evening. Maybe this has already been discussed, maybe not, but I have got some safety issues about all of this that.
Oh,
I
one
wanna mention.
second. And we won't count this against your time, but we need your name
Oh,
and
Rick
address.
Monier, 13511 Island Lake Road, Chelsea,
Thank you.
Michigan. Thank you. Sorry about that. I know better.
No problem.
Anyway, my safety is concerned, and one is that all sleeping areas must have escape routes in case of fire and have working smoke detectors. All bathrooms should have guide rails on the thing for senior citizens or people, and stair steps likewise. Again, the reason I'm concerned about this, my dad died in a house fire. Thank you.
And yeah, just come on up. It'll be a race to the microphone. Well, there you go.
My name is Jonathan Kronberg. I'm one of the co-owners that we recently just rebuilt at 9098 Dexter Pinckney Road. Number one, I want to say thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight and to make sure. And I also want to say thank you to the entire, planning commission and all the time spent on that. I've been on boards before and I know how much time is actually spent during those things. And a lot of times you're going to get howled over left and right. So I want to say thank you to all of that. Understanding based upon what that report showed, I just want to make sure that we put our point together and say that I strongly disagree with what their decision was to not recommend what for having lakeside homes be part of these STRs. It's clear that from my side of it, it leans a little bit more heavily on the older generation behind things and not to the new generations that are coming up within this. I spent many years looking through different lakeside communities, whether it's all the way up north or all the way out west. And being in the Coast Guard in the past, I've also seen it all come about over the last 2 decades. So my main 3 points behind this entire thing were, number one, the survey results. Number two, the generational gap that also includes kind of the current property conditions that are alongside, especially within Portage Lakeside. And then also just doing a quick comparison when it comes to somebody like Hamburg Township compared to Dexter Township of how they've been able to handle things there. Number one, on my side of it is the survey speaks for itself. It says 70% of people actually want some form of what STRs might look like, which is a pretty large, voice behind that. And from my side, I just want to make sure that that voice is being spoken about, not just from one side of the table, but from the other as well. Key number two, which I think might be one of the most important side of this, as I bring my son and our other neighbor here too, they're 15 and 16 years old. This generational gap behind what these current, and as well as these current property, what they look like. I've been renovating homes for almost 20 years. And with us now building a new home and helping build the one next door to us, it seems like something to us that we really want to make sure that we're starting to set the tone for them. Because this next generation, I really think they're looking for the ability to rent short term, but they're looking for their ways to continue to manage what these investments are going to look like for years to come. And based upon the current conditions of some of these homes, especially along Dexter Pinckney Road, there's a lot of them that are condemned, that have not been touched. There's some of them that don't even have a working furnace within it. And we're looking at something that even out of Ann Arbor coming up here throughout the winter too. So we want to be able to supplement all these raising costs and continue to update our home, as well as hand it down to our next generation behind this. So I know I don't have that much time left and I can continue to talk over and over again about regulations and everything else, but I want to kind of leave with this. I know we have a clear choice here behind this. And for us, we can either lock the next generation out of our community or we can welcome them in to the lake community that can thrive. So from my side of it, I don't want to, let's regulate wisely, not prohibit blindly. Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name's Kurt Weber, 9381 Dexter Pinckney Road. I spoke to you before in October and told you how I was retired and had run my VRBO home for 7 years without a complaint, and my neighbors love me. I urged you to use discretion in whatever decision you made, knowing that I am a pre-existing legal residential unit. And most importantly, since I am not a bed and breakfast, no existing law or ordinance could possibly shut me down. Surely that could not happen here. Some allowance would surely be made. Then I attended each and every meeting of the committee after getting wind of the misleading survey and their appointments in meetings. I noticed that at the second meeting that one member listed as the only Airbnb owner on the misleading survey was not in attendance and had not attended the first meeting either. When I inquired, I was told that the member had family issues. I asked if I could join the committee, so I could join and be representative of their STR owners. I was told I would have to ask the supervisor, Lonnie, and I went and met with Lonnie, and he said he denied me due to my late request. He assured me, however, that the committee member representing STR owners would be there from then on. She only attended the last meeting as more of a zealot against STRs than the rest of the committee. The entire thing was a sham, period. I cannot afford to initiate it myself, but I will gladly join in legal action against this extreme local government overreach. Also, there's a good chance that a sensible legislature may render all of this ridiculous work null and void. Did you want to have one of the most ridiculously restrictive STR ordinances in at least this state, probably in the nation? I have already turned down several bookings for next year and have my place up for long-term rent, so you win.
I'm Tom Fant, 9601 Portage Lake Avenue. I just heard an interesting argument that the younger generation wants to support or wants to use short-term rentals. That's the very argument against short-term rentals, I think, because what he's advocating for is turning our neighborhoods into transients as opposed to having permanent residents. And that totally changes the culture of our community. In my area, in one block of within the one block I live on Portage Lake, there are currently 4 short-term rentals listed on either Vrbo or Airbnb, and it's going to continue to get worse. Also, I mentioned earlier that just this morning, there's a real estate listing for new construction that just came on the market on Dexter Pinckney Road, and it's listed as 5-bedroom, 4-bath. 2 of the bedrooms have master bathrooms attached to them. That's not the way you build residential property. That's the way you build rental property. So this is just going to continue to proliferate if we don't take decisive action and nip this in the bud before it gets out of control. Thanks.
Hello. Pam Weber, live in Dexter. However, we have a family cottage 2 doors down from the new neighbors, 9118 Dexter Pinckney Road. It's been in the family for 78 years. We do not have a furnace because it's a summer cottage that gets closed up and winterized. So I remain opposed to short-term rentals due to reasons I've stated previously, primarily the size of the lots. An example is these neighbors recently rented for 5 days and a young child was feeding seagulls and over 100 seagulls were swarming our property and the 2 adjacent, and the young child screamed, ran toward the house. An adult opened the door, handed more food to the child, and more food was thrown to the seagulls. No one on a lake property wants seagulls. None of us do. And so that's not going to happen with permanent ownership. We are friends with the folks that sold to these new neighbors, and I know what the selling price was. Theirs is now on the market. It is the exact property that this gentleman talked about for 1.6 million. and it was purchased for around $500,000. How can the younger generation afford $1,000 a night for that rental? So I disagree, and I thank you for your time and consideration.
Hi, my name is Carol Fisher and I'm an owner at 9377 Dexter Pinckney Road. I am not an Airbnb owner, but I have lived next door to an Airbnb. One of my neighbors has one. And for the last 8 years, we have had no problems. A matter of fact, we've had no complaints even to our neighbor. And when I've been to the meetings that I've been to 3 meetings, I have not seen like evidence of all these nuisance complaints, and they weren't provided on the website, which I took a chance to look at today. And I feel that, I wrote some things out here, but my problem with this whole thing is that in the United States, property rights are fundamental, natural, unalienable, and citizen owners have a vested right to lease their properties. No citizen of Dexter Township should be disenfranchised except by due course of the law of the land. Now, one of the things about this is that this is going on all around the country. It's not just here in Michigan. And when I say the law of the land, the Michigan legislature, they have a place in this too. And I've watched all of these things go on. And I feel that my advice would be is that I'm a taxpayer and I don't want to pay for this. I don't know if you've watched what's gone on in Texas. The city of Dallas, Texas has spent $3.5 million of taxpayer money to fight short-term rentals, only to be shot down in both the district and the appellate courts. Does Dexter Township really want to go down this road? Do we want to open our ordinances? Do we want to open the books to further scrutiny? Do we really want that for our small community? Or should it be a job of the Michigan legislature? It's like, I don't ever plan on having an Airbnb, but I do believe that ownership has rights. And we've seen a lot of encroachment of people's rights. And I just don't think that for a small community like this, that we should be wading off into this. I think that I haven't seen the cases of the nuisance complaints because they were not presented to us. They were not presented to us. I heard like maybe 1 or 2 the entire time that I was here. I feel that the committee did not make their case. And so really what I'm asking you to do is to table this. Table it for after the Michigan legislature deals with it, when it's dealt on a bigger national scale. Why go through all of this and then have $3.5 million into fighting it in the courts? Because I just have a feeling that, when you have a township or any government entity that comes up with things that are not reasonable, and this seems very unreasonable, maybe enforce the rules and laws that we have on the books. That's what I'm asking. Enforce those ordinances. Let's get out of this before it gets bad.
Thank you.
Anyways, thank you so much for your time. I do appreciate everybody here. I don't do it myself, and I do appreciate you all sitting and listening to all this. So thank you.
Thank you.
How you guys doing? My name is Faraz Ubaid, 9098 Dexter Pinckney. Jonathan and I, both our families decided to buy that lot that our good neighbor Pam was talking about for it to be a multifamily home. And we only decided to list it after last week's decision that we saw the report come out. The idea was never to list it. The idea was for us to enjoy the lake side properties. We both have younger kids, so we want them to enjoy the water. But we also wanted to make sure that we can afford to stay in that house. And STR was going to be one of the options that we're going to use to kind of list it. Now, to Pam's point, $1,000 a night is a little bit high, but that makes sure that you're not going to get, anybody renting that house. It's going to be responsible adults. And there is an extensive process when it comes to, allowing people to rent that to rent the property, whether it's through VRBO or Airbnb. So, we want to make sure that it's our house. We're not gonna get anybody in there that's gonna ruin the house or the property. So that's just the whole point of us wanting to live on a lake, but obviously we have homes and jobs, not in Dexter. We've been spending a lot of time on the lake. We go to the local businesses, we spend money here, we bring our friends around. And the point of having this house is to be here year round, not just to come here for 2-3 months a year in the summertime and then close it up and not support the local businesses that we have here. So thank you for your time.
Hello, I'm Chuck Colby, 9470 Dexter Pinckney Road. I bought a couple of homes side by side 6 years ago, and I was thrilled to do it because I grew up going to a family cottage on a little lake in Clare, Michigan. And I loved my time on the lake. It was the joy of my summer. And so living on the lake was always my dream. And I realized once I lived there how lucky I was to live there, to have access to this all the time. Because when I was a kid, I had a couple weekends a summer that I had access. And those were some of the best weekends of my life. When my own kids were young, I still had access to that family cottage because my aunt still owned it. And so I would take my kids on a vacation to a family cottage where we had a week. And it was the best week of the summer. It was the week every one of my kids talked about all year long. When are we going back up to the cottage? And we had access because of family to a place. I realize now that I was so lucky as a child to have access. My kids were lucky to have access to a lake. There are lots of kids who don't have a family member who has a home on a lake. And so sometimes this is the only access that they get to a lake. So I think we cheat people out of potentially the best week of their summer if there's no opportunity. And so if this is just the beginning of that, and this is successful all around, people will lose access to the lakes, and it'll become further exclusive in this country to have access to the lakes. And I think that's really the wrong direction to move. When we bought our homes side by side, our dream was we'd have a summer rental where people could have that special week of the summer at an affordable price. We're not talking about $1,000 a night. We're talking about $1,500 for the week to spend a great week at the lake. And I hope that we have the opportunity to share that with other people. It's been an important part of our plan in revitalizing 2 homes that were absolute wrecks on Dexter Pinckney Road to know the other place is going to help to pay the cost. And this really throws a wrench in that, for sure.
Are there other members of the public wishing to speak?
Hi, my name is Larry Mahalik, 9590 Portage Lake Avenue. Just to say, I've been a resident for 43 years in the same house. I came here just to watch and to listen a little bit. I'm just really outraged about, I don't want to say outraged, just kind of concerned. I've seen several of these. I'm one of the neighbors here of mine. We have 4 homes that are up for rent on our blocks, probably within 100 yards. I have one which is within 50 feet of my front door, in which people pull in and out at all different times. I don't know who's coming into these homes. What concerns me is, and as someone mentioned about generation, well, they do, offer these homes up. It's summertime, let's have a party. You can't tell me how many people are going to come to this. So it's like you see on TV, one person has a home, then they turn it into a big party haven. And so that's what I'm afraid is going to happen out here. this summer, this is the lake. It's already busy. The lake is extremely busy. Then you put out a bunch of young people that don't have no respect for our older homes and our older neighbors. Yes, we've been out here a long time. Are we an old generation? Yes, but we've earned it.
Jim Drolet, 9933 Algonquin. Yes, the Court of Appeals in Michigan has already ruled that these are commercial uses. And these are not commercial neighborhoods around the lake, they're residential neighborhoods. I think people have a myopic view of what these things can look like. If you go around the country, you look at some of these more attractive places, it's not just folks like some of these folks that buy it to invest in it. It's Blackstone. It's all these big private equity firms. And they could care less about the neighbors who work their lives and live there. All they're interested is turning it over, making money. That's not what the lake community is like. That's not what the master plan looks like. And please, we do not need to start destroying our neighborhood. Just because other people do it doesn't mean we have to do it here in Dexter Township. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jenny Morgan. I live at 7905 Sour Drive on North Lake. And first big shout out to the committee, which I think worked very hard. Trustees have worked very hard, difficult issue. I think that one of the issues going forward is balancing fairness in the regulation. For every short-term rental, you have neighbors on either side. So two tax-paying families are at a disadvantage over the one person who's using it as a commercial property with respect to who comes, who makes money, who doesn't, and the fact that generally speaking, if there were regulations, either the number or the distance between that person not only has to live next door, but we would be unable to have their own short-term rental. So in assessing fairness in regulations, I think it's really difficult. I also think that in doing regulations, the taxes and fees are not collected appropriately. Other than a 6% sales tax, which may or may not be paid by the renter, we don't prosecute that. The Dexter Township short-term rentals don't really pay any additional local fees or taxes for registration, enforcement, excessive sewer, or septic use, use of park or lake use, boats, or any additional tax to the Special Assessment District for lake management as is required. The taxes and fees paid to a local community must be sufficient in an amount to pay for robust enforcement and prosecution. This may take the profit out of running an STR, but it will put the responsibility on the STR owner. Having the STRs limits opportunities for new home buyers, young home buyers to move in and become permanent neighbors. With housing inventory at an all-time low, the STR makes it more difficult for people to find a home and buy a price at which they can afford. New families unable to move in exacerbates the community loss and increases sales of STRs, especially to investors or corporate. I respect the people who live next door to the STR, as we've seen, and making it more closer to a bed and breakfast. Because they're there, it's not a front desk at a motel, but at least it's a little closer. So have some other ideas, but I'll wait on those. Thank you. I would like leave to hand out summation. Thanks, Joe.
No, I don't think we've started your time. We'll let you get back to the podium.
Couple of quick things. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Shout out to the committee, special committee and the board. Short-term rentals is a can of worms. It has been opened. We have got to shut the can of worms. As of today, in Dexter Township, they're not permitted. End of conversation, except possibly in commercial, possibly agriculture. The Bennett proposal of Hamburg is inappropriate. Attached to my submission is a picture of what can happen with short-term rentals. People abuse parking, et cetera, et cetera. Short-term rentals is a commercial enterprise. It is not for residential neighborhoods. That is a simple fact. The reason that I have suggested that the Putnam ordinance is necessary, appropriate, and a good template is that it provides reasonable regulation. It provides due process. It provides protection to the lake. Brenda Donaldson is not here tonight, but she wants you to know that short-term rentals have an incredibly adverse impact on our environment, not only for the current owners, but for the next generation and for the generation thereafter. I urge you to be very, very cautious, as I have in the prior submissions. Read them, think about it. I think that you'll come to the conclusion that if you're going to regulate it, I think the Putnam is a very reasonable, rational, well thought through ordinance. Thank you very much.
Are there other members of the public wishing to speak? All right, we'll do one last call. Any other members of the public wishing to speak? All right. Yeah, oh, okay.
Hi, Michelle Colby, 9470 Dexter Pinckney Road. At the risk of sounding like an idiot, but I'm willing to, just doing a quick search that I don't understand where this term commercial property is coming from, or just looking it up, short-term rental properties are classified for residential homes through both VRBO and Airbnb. So I don't understand that complaint. As for concerns over the type of people we may get at our homes, sure, but I know that we have neighbors that are loud all night long and have their lights on all night long. So I guess I think we can all assume, we care about our homes. That's why we're making improvements and trying to improve the houses that we bought along that road that were completely, I mean, they were disgusting. We can set rules, right? Like, we can be responsible. We know who we're gonna rent out to, and they're gonna sign something that says, this is your parking, these are the rules, don't feed the seagulls. And we're adults, right? Like, we can hold our renters accountable. If there's complaints, you guys can hold us accountable, yeah? The cops can hold us accountable. I don't know, I think the negative side may be getting blown out of proportion a little bit. That's it.
Any additional members of the public wishing to speak?
Chris Karen, 9106 Dexter Pickney Road. I don't have an eloquent speech. I didn't plan on speaking, but I find it interesting. I am building a home right next door to Kronberg. Who's helping me. I don't know if I'm gonna do a short-term rental or not, but what I've heard tonight is a lot of opinions. Things that could happen whether you're a short-term renter or not. Not everyone takes care of their homes. We talk about, well, you're gonna have a lot of people there and the impact on the environment. Well, if you're using your summer home and you have a lot of family members, it's the same impact. But again, we go back to opinions. Well, why doesn't my personal choice of what I want to do with my property, what I'm investing in, my money, don't I get a stronger opinion of what I can do with it? So a lot of things, again, I get change is hard. And the older you get, the harder it gets. You're used to a certain way of living, certain behaviors, totally understandable. But we talk about younger generations. Why don't they get a say in what that looks like for them versus this is the way it's always been? Again, I know change is hard, but it's constant. If you're not changing, you're not growing. And as a town, as a city, why would we not continue to grow? I don't know.
Any additional members of the public wishing to speak? Last call. See, the planning commission warned me that I would be here for at least 4 hours, so I don't want to cut anybody off. All right, hearing none. We will close public comment and move into our discussion items for short-term rentals, which is the recommendation from the planning commission. We have in our packets here several different documents. You have a memo, both from our Director of Planning and Zoning, as well as a memo from Carlisle Wortman. Both Fletcher, our Director of Planning and Zoning, and Megan from Carlisle Wortman are here. So as we open up discussion, if there are questions, rather than having them do a presentation, I thought it would be best just to let the board members ask questions if they had them so that we can make sure that every specific question that you might have gets answered. So we will open up board discussion. I do want to say as we go through this, I think for those of you who may have come in after we started with the agenda, we have moved this to a discussion item. I do think that any actual action of this will take place at our September meeting, unless the board makes a different motion here tonight, but that we will conduct our discussion here as a board. This is the first time that the Board of Trustees, one, is discussing this issue directly, right? It's been done at the Short-Term Rentals Committee as well as the Planning Commission. But two, the first time that we have an actual recommendation to us from the Planning Commission that just happened at their meeting a couple weeks ago. So this is our first touch and discussion of these items. I know that it's been going on for about a year since that was filed. And as I said in the Sun Times recently, I believe we're moving towards a conclusion. But our goal has always been from the beginning to be very deliberate about this process, to make sure that there was public input and to make sure that nothing was rushed, so that the decision that we make is a thoughtful one based on all of the information that we have available. So we'll move into discussion.
I think it's important for everybody to know whether or not short-term rentals are permitted in our current ordinance, because we have not really received a policy briefing at the board. The Board of Trustees hasn't received a policy briefing on this other than these memos that are in it. We got the long report from the subcommittee, but and my understanding is short-term rentals are not permitted because in residential areas, because the residential permissible uses are specified in the ordinance. Anything that is not specified is not allowed. That is what I heard from our attorney, and I see Megan and Fletcher are nodding, but I think we should, that would be a good place for us to start to make sure that everybody on the board knows that although we have short-term rentals operating in the township at this time, it is not a permitted use in the zoning, in residential, rural residential or lake residential zones. Correct?
Yes, that is correct. Short-term rentals are not listed on the land use table in the zoning ordinance, thus it's not permitted currently.
So that means that what we are proposing a change from the status quo? Is it making, are we making our status quo more permissive, or are we removing a right with this proposal?
With this proposal, we would be adding a new land use to the land use table. The planning commission forwarded over regulations to allow short-term rentals in the agricultural and the commercial zoning districts.
Okay.
Throughout some of the discussions, the planning commission thought they should be removed from the lake residential zoning districts as well as the rural residential zoning districts.
Or continue to be disallowed in residential and lake, but that it was okay to open the door to short-term rentals in ag and commercial.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Not currently permitted.
And-
Potentially opening the door to allow them in a couple districts.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions or discussion? Trustee Sanders.
Sorry, go ahead, sir. Question, and really, I don't know much about this. I came to I came to the last public hearing, and have read, but I hear some concern about these big companies buying properties to rent. Is it possible to regulate that and say only homeowners can, single homeowners can do this?
So what it's possible to do is to say that it's only it would only be a homeowner who could lease who could have a short-term rental, or it could only be a somebody who owns property within the township to operate a short-term rental. Sometimes some municipalities will split the short-term rental use out into 3 types. One where it's an owner that hosts and they are only renting out the house on a short-term basis where they live, so that's their homestead. 2, that it is someone who owns property within the municipality itself. Several large cities have done that in order to regulate short-term rentals. And then a third item is where someone is that the house itself is primarily a short-term rental use. So then it has the potential to turn over for a number of weeks. What was in the ordinance that was in your packet, ordinance 45, what that did is it said that a company or a property owner could only own 2 short-term rentals within the township. And that would be a way to limit a larger company, like some of these investment companies, which have invested in short-term rentals and look to do them in multiple places. That was the policy pathway, that was the direction from the subcommittee and the planning commission as to how to address that concern.
Okay, so I'm understanding that there is a way to regulate that.
There is ways to regulate it, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And do you think this proposal achieves that goal?
I think the proposal would achieve that goal if you kept the stipulation where you could only own 2 short-term rentals within the township. That was that would limit a big investment company.
How would that limit a big investment company? Because it sounds like those other options would be more effective.
Those other options could be more effective. Usually the big investment company would be looking to buy several homes. And then also a lot of times they're looking to buy them in the same area, so it's easier to manage.
So it would be somewhat effective, but it might be more effective to say they have to be they can only be operated by someone with a homestead in Dexter Township.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
But so I just want to be clear that that's still only within this recommendation would be for agricultural and commercial zoning, not the lake or residential.
Yes, that's what was
Okay.
recommended by the planning commission.
Okay.
What is the reason behind that recommendation prohibiting lake rentals?
There was a handful of concerns brought up by the planning commissioners. Some of the concerns were brought up from residents tonight, but the dimensions of a lot of the lakefront properties are small in scale, and the concern of having nuisance issues come up from that. One way to prevent that from happening is to require the STRs to have or to meet the size requirements for the zoning district in which they reside in. Because as you know, a lot of the lake properties are not conforming and are much smaller than what the zoning ordinance currently allows. A lot of the properties are 50 feet wide, neighbors back to back. But in general, I would say nuisance issues were the biggest concern brought up, and some inconsistencies with the intent of that district. Do you have anything else?
What I will add is, what Putnam Township has been brought up as an example. That's an example of a township where they have lakefront property and agricultural property, and they only allow short-term rentals in agriculture or large lot areas. Another one of my clients, Brandon Township in Oakland County, again, agricultural area, but has several neighborhoods that are clustered around lakes. They chose to only allow short-term rentals in, I believe, their rural estates zoning district. So, and that's a large lot residential zoning district that would be analogous to your rural residential.
Is, with the houses, I'm gonna use Dexter Pinckney Road as an example. They're very tiny. And if they were allowed, could those homes even comply with life safety, fire codes under the NFPA?
I'm not qualified to answer that question.
But it was built into the draft that they would have to comply with the fire ordinances, and if they could not, they would not be eligible for a license.
Right.
So we would not, I mean, the recommendation was to, and the subcommittee was working with the fire department to ensure that the proposal was crafted in a way that would ensure fire safety and enforcement of fire safety.
Additional question? Ms. Singleton?
Have we, or has the planning commission or anybody done an financial study of what it would cost to enforce this and what the routine would be if we chose, what the enforcement cost? Because I think we all agree that taxpayers should not incur the cost of running a business per se. But have we done any financial study of how much it would cost a short-term owner in yearly fees to be able to enforce it if the township could enforce it?
No, there has not been a study that's been conducted in regards to that, but there has been a lot of conversations about having fees that would cover said enforcement. So if the township were going to adopt something and wanted that to be the case, I think a study would be necessary to understand the scope of that.
And would you recommend that we conduct such a study prior to approving any change and prior to permitting the use? Or, I mean, it makes sense to me that we would do such a study prior to changing our ordinance. Shouldn't we know what the operational impact is going to be and how we're going to pay for it before we approve a change in the ordinance?
I would say so. Megan, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, just the only thing I would add is even if you keep the status, let's say you decide to reject or deny the zoning ordinance amendment and the amendment proposed to you by the planning commission, and you want to keep the status quo, which is essentially that the only way short-term rental could continue to operate is as a bed and breakfast under the zoning ordinance, which has certain parameters. Then you would need to take enforcement measures as complaints came and as you do your code enforcement, that you would probably incur other costs that you haven't in the past because of either this was not an issue that you're looking at, or you currently have a moratorium on code enforcement of short-term rentals. So I would think either way, there's going to be a financial impact. But it's always wise to study what those are.
And I think that the law permits a certain number of days per year for short-term rentals, even when it's disallowed. Is it 14 days a year or something? Not our law, but I mean, that was something that was discussed. I sat in on the subcommittee one day, and it was something that was discussed on the short.
I do
on
not
the-
believe that that was ever verified to
Mhm.
be fact.
Okay, so that would be a legal question for Sarah, is if we continue to disallow, is there a minimal threshold number of allowable days for short-term rentals?
We could verify with legal consulting and get back.
I think the financial aspect of this is huge. I also draw attention to, there's a chart on page 45, which I'm sure you guys don't see, but there's a discussion of a cap of what percentage do we allow? And we have engaged in many hours of conversation between the subcommittee, the planning commission, and now it's to the board. And by these numbers put forth, we're talking about 31 homes in Dexter Township that could potentially be a short-term rental. And that's if we allowed lake and commercial. Well, commercial is not applicable. So it's really 22 homes that we're discussing. And the fees that would be needed from these 22 homes to monitor this program and to enforce this program, it's like,
Karen, I think we're talking about 2 homes.
no.
Because
Lake residential is 9 homes.
But it's not, this proposal doesn't allow it in lake residential.
That's why I subtracted it. So it's instead of
Or rural
31.
residential, right? Or recreation conservation. It only permits in agriculture and commercial, which is 2.
So we're talking 2? So we're talking about all this for 2 homes.
Correct. That's right. That's why I wonder why
That would be if you chose to keep that cap.
Yeah, right.
The
yeah,
committee looked
right.
at 5%, 3%, and 1%. And what was directed, the ordinance 45 that's in your packet was not in any way updated to reflect the planning commission's
Oh, it wasn't.
recommendation. No.
Oh.
So
I thought they
those
were
could change
recommending
and
this.
things like that. So.
And just to clarify, that was a decision that I made this week because until this was the first time this board was going to discuss, and this is an enormous document that costs a lot of money to revise. Until we knew our intent, it didn't make sense. This was done for the short-term rental committee for their recommendation.
Understand the discrepancies that I've read.
I still don't understand. So if it could be explained.
The subcommittee had a cap chart, and I think it was like 3% and 5%. And it was a large number if we were to allow short-term, bring your table back. If we were to allow short-term rentals in all the areas on this is on page 45.
45, Laura.
Yeah, I'm on the
oh,
page.
It was a pretty large number, and, you know, we wouldn't want short-term rentals to be the primary usage for the township for, homes. So the subcommittee discussed that cap and thought that, so if we were to use this cap and all these areas were allowed to have short-term rentals, that we felt that a smaller number was a little more palatable for the community in that it would be a compromise of keeping the Dexter Township charm and still allowing, it was like the happy medium. So that's where the 1% came from.
Okay, so basically, if this means that there are 100, for just agricultural, the first one, there's 189 dwellings, 2 dwellings could be considered for short-term rentals and more?
That was if we,
Did 1%.
that was if we did 1% for all of the areas.
Oh. And you're saying that this cap is not, oh, what are you saying about it?
Well,
That it's not gonna be
I don't think
included?
That is in there.
Or it's
I
not
don't think that
relevant?
It's an issue. The cap is a table that we're not really.
Not
So
included in the proposed
if I can, maybe this will help.
Okay.
Coming into this meeting, the board, in my opinion, and obviously like, tell me if I'm wrong, had 3 potential paths forward. One is to say we accept what the planning commission has brought forward as a recommendation. And if we did that, we tell the planning commission and then this draft is updated. I mean, there's other changes like this. If you look on page 44, I think it was, we talk about motorized boating restrictions. If we adopt the planning commission recommendation, that would also go away because we're not allowing it in lakeside residential. So there's a lot of changes in this draft that would have to be made if the planning commission recommendation was adopted. The other option is we do have a report from the short-term rental committee, which is who we charged with doing the research of this. And their recommendation was this on a 3-2 vote. So it's very close. I just want to be very clear. It was a divided committee. But their recommendation was to allow short-term rentals, including in the Lake District, with these regulations, Laura, so that this big document has all of the different regulations that the committee had put forward. Our third option, as I see it, is to say no to both, and we are sticking with what our current ordinance says, which doesn't allow them anywhere but in the commercial district. And so those are now look, the board has the power to do anything in between, right? But for the simplicity of discussion, those are the 3 main buckets. We have a short-term rental committee recommendation, we have a planning commission recommendation, and we have our current ordinance.
And these have not gone through legal review yet, right?
Correct. The planning commission recommendation, what was the date of that meeting, Fletcher? July 22nd. So it was very recent.
So the original intention was for this just to be a public meeting, but but because I was surprised that there was an action item but now it's starting to make sense because we weren't necessarily expecting, we didn't know that the planning commission was going to take action. So when we left the last board meeting, we were expecting to come here and hear from the public. But now we also have a proposal.
Now we also,
that came
correct.
from the planning.
Which I think it's fair to say, and Marty is here, but which is not a proposal that I expect. When we planned this, I thought we would be looking at 2 options: the short-term rental committee recommendation or keeping with our current ordinance. And the planning commission voted a different way, right? They sent us a different recommendation. So we do, it was a little bit different than when we scheduled this a month ago. I thought our options would be slightly different.
And just to be clear, the planning commission did not go through the same kind of exhaustive research process that the subcommittee went through. Do you think that's fair, Alicia?
I don't know that that's fair. I feel that Fletcher was in on the subcommittee meetings and he was in on the planning commission meetings, and I feel that he helped guide and answer all of our questions. So I don't think it's fair to say that the planning commission did not do.
The same level of research. So what was the reasoning for the decision?
So the agriculture, it was, my understanding is, look, the cost of enforcement to have, you know, the lakefront, the houses have to come up to some form of life safety code, fire safety, all the enforcement, despite what one of the commenters said, the police are not going to come out to your short-term rental to get your guest under control. They don't have that time. So the sheriff's department's not going to respond to that stuff unless somebody's bleeding out. So it's the thing with the agriculture is properties are wide enough that we feel that the problems that as a township we would face would be, we would be able to afford the licensing, the review. The properties are farther apart, so there would be a limited amount of disturbance to the neighbors who live next door. So it was this may be the best we can do for now. So that's, I think that's where the agriculture came from, is that it's, you know, I doubt that our own infrastructure to handle widespread short-term rentals throughout the township. The cost is, I don't think people realize the cost.
I'm going to do something a little bit abnormal just in case, but Marty is here, and Marty, the question has come up around the planning commission. Is there, and do not feel obligated. Is there anything you'd like to add, or do you feel like it's been adequately addressed?
I'm remaining as chair, that I don't speak for somebody out of order. The planning commission speaks through its motions and discussion as documented by the minutes, which of course just happened a couple of weeks ago and therefore have not yet been approved. So I don't want to get ahead of all that. I think part of the discussion about permitting short-term rentals in ag zoning is that it was in accordance, it was harmonious with the master plan and some of the goals stated as promoting agritourism. I don't want to go so far out as to say that those two things have to go together, but that was an additional part of the discussion as I recall. But I can try to respond to specific questions if you have them. I just don't want to pretend like I can adequately convey all the thoughts that were expressed over a 4-hour meeting.
No, I don't want to put you on the spot too much. I just wanted to make sure if there was anything you wanted to add that we gave you the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, that wasn't especially my expected outcome, that it was going to be, well, commercial is permitted because it's commercial, but that it was going to be, you know, one particular zoning district and not considered no more like what the short-term rental committee had discussed. But it was going to be more of a, we can do that or we can do that. And as you stated, that's how we essentially have this third bucket now.
Thank you. Trustee Sanders.
I'm sorry, Lonnie, I'm still trying to get clear on the buckets. Okay, and you talked about number 2. One is to accept this as 2 is to the report from the committee that includes lake districts. So that with regulations, so that is a possibility.
Yeah, this board can enact any of those types of ordinances that we would like. So we don't have to, we will have to make a determination on what the planning commission has sent to us, but we're not limited to that. So the board could decide that we want to do the other option and say this is, or we could direct the planning commission to look into, I mean, there's lots of options in that way. So yes.
But we don't have to make a decision on the recommendation of the planning commission tonight, right? We could, in particular, because there hasn't been a review or, you know, I mean.
Correct.
It's
Legal review.
Yeah, correct. That's why the nomenclature of discussion versus action it didn't matter.
And if we stick to our.
If the board wanted to make a decision tonight, they could, but we don't. I don't believe that that was the case, because this board, in my experience, has been very deliberative, and we generally like to talk about these things multiple times before we make a decision. So
And if we stick to our current ordinance right now, there are a number of operating short-term rentals. And there is a moratorium on enforcing that, right? That, because they're not currently permitted. Right. Okay.
And we did that. That was because I asked for it, and I asked for it because I wanted short-term rental operators such as the couple people that came forward today feel comfortable coming to the public meeting and saying their piece, and not worrying that then the next day somebody was going to come and take enforcement action. And that's where we are right now, is we're in
Okay.
we're holding that in it. We're holding enforcement in abeyance pending the outcome of the deliberation.
Okay, I'm more clear. Thanks.
Was the intention of the planning commission to enact the restrictions that were recommended by the subcommittee, such as making sure you got adequate parking and, blah, 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 all those things that we talked about, but only in ag, or what was?
So their motion included to update the draft standalone ordinance in conjunction with what they had recommended. However, by your own ordinances and by state law, that is a standalone ordinance, and it's not the planning commission's obligation, unless you give it to them, to rewrite it or to do anything to it.
it's the board's.
It's the board's.
It's the board's. That's why I asked that we hold on doing that until this discussion took place.
But my question was really not about the writing of the ordinance. It was about the intention of the planning commission. Is it their intention that it be highly regulated in the ag areas as
it would be in the lake.
as it would have been in all districts, or did they not answer that question?
Do you wanna?
Sure. Yes, that was the intention with some differences, specifically about promotion of agritourism. So there was a lot of hesitation on special events with short-term rentals. Somebody rents a cottage on the lake for the weekend and 20 people show up and cause an issue. So there's a lot of, right, there was a lot of contention and discussion about that. But they wanted to expand upon that in the agricultural districts to kind of promote what the master plan was talking about with promoting agritourism. And of course, keeping dimensional standards in place, parking standards, et cetera. There's a lot, like Supervisor Scott said, there was a lot of mention about specific lakefront issues like boating restrictions. Those would all be stricken from that ordinance if the board were to go with the planning commission's recommendation and have us rewrite that draft standalone ordinance.
And so they excluded rural residential, which are larger lots, because there was a proactive intention to accomplish the master planning goals, not because there was significant concern about the impact of short-term rentals in rural residential.
That's yes, and the planning commissioners did discuss how there are a handful of rural residential lots along some of the township lakes.
And rivers.
Right. So they were talking about master plan intention and then preserving natural features along the township's lakes and streams.
Okay. Thank you.
Trustee Nolte.
One other thing I'd like to bring up, and I'm glad we're talking about our master plan and getting us back to what our vision has been for the township as we get ready to go into a planning later this month. I also don't see in here, I don't see water impact, and that bothers me because we are all about the environment. We are all about protecting our water and keeping our farmland space and everything. It seems to be the board's strong part, but I don't see anything in these documents of what happens to our waterways. Mark, can we put you on the spot for 2 seconds? Okay, fair enough. It worries me that it's not documented. That we talk about this, but it's not into consideration. And I think it should be. I think our lakes and our water and our rivers should have that. And if part of that is rural residential, I think that has to take a consideration. But now I understand why this didn't match. Makes much more sense to me.
I should have probably said that at the beginning, huh?
This is way off.
Is there, speaking of documentation for that, is there evidence that rental users use the lakes more?
Yes, different more.
With greater.
Differently?
With
And
greater-
where is that research? Is that what you're saying isn't here?
Right, I can
It-
put it together. I just,
well,
it's
it
not
was-
part of the pack.
It was in the report, I think, that you provided last month, Alicia. I think you provided that article on.
It was the 100-page short-term rental report that was sent to the planning commission and then was added to your packet.
Oh, okay. Well,
Last
that
month.
100-page is probably why I don't remember it.
But in there was research about our lake shore
Okay.
and if you go to, say, even
can go to
the
Rec
Huron
Union.
River Chain of Lakes Association, it's amazing how fragile our lake shores are, and I think that we take that for granted.
We do.
I have another.
I think Michelle had her hand up first and I'll come back to you.
So can you explain the potential boating restrictions, especially because, I mean, our lakes are open to the community as well as outside of the community. I mean,
So in the proposed ordinance 45, which would be the standalone ordinance that would have rules and regulations on short-term rentals and specifics, what is proposed is that short-term rental owner could have their boat be rented and be used. But a short-term rental renter could not bring their own boat and use that. But you make an excellent point that there is public access for lakes, so that doesn't, and then there would be possibly enforcement issues with that. Also, to speak to some of the environmental concerns always with lakes is septics and sewers, and if they get overwhelmed. And that was the reason, again, in this proposed ordinance 45, for any short-term rental to have either a certificate saying that from the county, if they're on septic, that the septic could handle it, or to have a sign-off or certificate from the sewer authority for where that short-term rental was located.
Right, and I'm the sewer board representative on Multi Lakes for this board, and Multi Lakes, we are addressing coming up with a financial plan, a fee schedule, if you were going to run a short-term rental on our sewer system, what it would take, because flow rates do go up. Parking violations happen if we have to tow cars because of parking in inappropriate places over grinder pumps. I mean, there's a lot of issues, and generally, I don't think the sewer authority has the resources to do the enforcing without short-term rental owners paying some of those fees. So that will be coming forth from Multi Lakes, and that affects short-term rentals anywhere within the sewer district, multi-township.
Trustee Sickinga.
Do you guys think that we should be concerned with the decisions that are going through the courts at this time? I mean, I was telling Lonnie, I got an email that described a recent decision, I think by the appeals court, will that affect our decisions or anything that's happening at the state legislature?
So, things will work their way through the courts, and so when there's a published circuit court decision, you should always take that into mind. It could, of course, go to the Michigan Supreme Court. There have been various bills that have been working their way through the legislature. The last one that I read that was, I know Michigan Municipal League is tracking, had a lot of the same things that you have in the proposed ordinance 45, in terms of that you have to have rules, and short-term rental owners have to have certain responsibilities, both to their guests and to the municipality itself. And then also, but it also had a preemption in there in terms of where short-term rentals could be allowed. So to make my long story short, there's always a risk that there will be a court decision or a state law that preempts what you're doing. However, what I would urge you to keep in mind is that you have these uses here. They're active right now. There are health, safety, and welfare issues associated with them, many of which can be mitigated with appropriate regulation. However, it's your decision to decide where they can be and in what situation, knowing that your financial or resource limitations at that time.
Additional questions or discussion from the board?
Just so I'm clear with the numbers, under the current ordinance, right, disallowed, so the number would be 0. The planning commission, if we are using the 1%, you're talking 2 potential short-term rentals. And if you went with the short-term rental committee's recommendation at the 1%, it'd be 31.
Yeah, and actually, I think the short-term rental committee originally had 5%, or they didn't have you didn't come to a number, you were looking at a range. So for the 5%, if it was only in agricultural, that would be 9 homes. If we're saying that there's not a cap on commercial, that's 20 properties. For Lakes Residential, a 5% cap is 43. Recreation conservation is 6, and then rural residential is 89. So if you had a 5% cap across all zoning districts allowing commercial without a cap, it would be 167.
That's with 5%.
That's
across all.
5%.
And just to, I think it's important to mention too, that the practicality, so what the planning commission sent to us relatively, I believe, mirrors what Putnam Township has done. And they currently have 0 active. So they are allowed, but there is no one actively operating a short-term rental, is my understanding. Is that accurate to your knowledge?
I think that's what was represented by various members of the public to the planning commission.
So to me, I guess I've tried to, I want to make, does anyone else have anything before I generally like to hear from everybody else before I say any of my, that's why to me, the planning commission recommendation to us is not as palatable to me, because to me, it is a denial just in a different name. And I would rather take action either direction, where we either say yes or we say no, as opposed to a no without saying no. I just think we owe that to people to be more clear. And I think that that's really what that recommendation is. If we're really talking about 2 homes that have the potential, and we know that the other municipality that's close has the same regulations but have 0, then we're actually just saying no without saying no. And I would prefer not to. I personally would prefer not to do that.
I need to take a break. I'm sorry.
No problem.
if we say no altogether, we have the problem of, there remains the problem of the 25 to 30 current operators, as
Yeah.
like Megan was pointing out, who are, because we have a reactive rather than proactive enforcement policy, although it's disallowed, they're operating, and they're operating without any parameters right now. So if we say no, we stick with no, we continue to have that issue of the current operator.
And I would argue that if we went with the planning commission recommendation, that would be the same, because I believe all of the currently operating ones are in the Lake District.
Yes, I think you're right. I mean,
So I don't think yeah.
I mean, I understand the agro-tourism argument. I mean, I think that's a policy-based argument. So I think it's good that they were making a policy-based decision, but its practical impact is tantamount to disallowing it altogether. So I agree with what you're saying, even though I understand why the planning commission made the recommendation it did.
Trustee Knowlton?
Well, I'm just pondering, and if we are talking about staying with our master plan and promoting agricultural tourism, I mean, there's no reason you can't up the percentage in that one category to take it from 2 to 10 or whatever that number is in that one category. I mean,
I think you're missing the point of the table. The table, honestly, once we started talking about just doing it in agriculture, that table shouldn't even be in here. We shouldn't even be considering that.
Well, I think we have two proposals in the package. One is the subcommittee.
I understand
Yeah.
that.
And that's in the subcommittee.
I understand, but I think that each time we talk about allowing it in just agriculture, what I see is everybody's getting stuck on this 1% table.
I think even without the table, my point wasn't about the table. My point was about practical impact.
Yeah.
Zero, doesn't matter. If no one wants to do it, doesn't matter if it's a 1% cap or a 100%. No one wants, if it's a 1% cap, let's do it. It's a high enough cap.
All I'll say is currently, of course, thank you, trustee Sikinga. Dexter Township has been reactive, not proactive. And since I've been little, growing up out here, I mean, I've known of short-term rentals that have been occurring. And since my last 5 years of being in this office, there's relatively not been many people that I have encountered that have came in with complaints. So, and then I struggle, of course, because, you know, if homeowners, if we go the number 2 route, I'm just the type of person that I just have to say, you know, if homeowners comply with safety regulations and abide by the rules or have specific rules to run a short-term rental, I mean, I just really believe that homeowners should be able to make decisions about their properties with ways to respect their neighbors. And that's also coming from a company perspective that I don't live on a lake, but we have property. I know many people that have a business on their property, and it just does concern me that, you know, if you open this up, what can you not do in the future? And that concerns me. And I just want to definitely put that out there where, you know, if the township, if people have to come and pull a permit, if people are working with reputable entities to rent out their property, there's 2 bedrooms, 4 people can be there, 2 cars. You have to comply by a set of rules, and if you don't, you lose that privilege. Just putting that out there, my thoughts.
Trustee Nolte?
I hear what you're saying. I differ. Because I think we have a lot of community members that come and purchase homes in our township, and they purchase in residential areas. They don't purchase in commercial areas. They purchase a residential home on a lake. And it'd be like, I happen to own multiple properties. Can I open a business in one of those properties? No, They can't. So why should a short-term rental be able to open a business in one of their properties? When you buy a home, you know the zoning you're buying in. That's a buyer's responsibility. And our lake is residential property.
I have another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So there was talk about a very large house that went in and sort of talking about that there might be a large number of people occupying that house as a short-term rental. And I wonder if we have the right to disallow very large houses. I mean, so does everything have to be regulated through the short-term rental ordinance, or are there other ways to ensure sort of quality of life and lack of nuisance? And I mean, I know it's too late for that house, but I mean.
Well, I mean, you can go ahead, Fletcher, but I think sorry. I think, I mean, that house would still have had to have complied with all of our zoning regulations with setbacks and size and.
Well, that's what I wonder, like,
So-
I thought we had rules in place that would prohibit very large new development on our lakefront, or am I wrong about that?
Like Supervisor Scott said, we have our development standards laid out in the zoning ordinance, and we have lot coverage standards. So 30% building coverage is the standard for lake residential lots, then 45% for all impervious surfaces. If you're exceeding 20%, you need to submit stormwater plans and go through an engineering review. That said, if somebody owns, say, a lot across the street from their primary lot, they can include that in their lot size for the coverage standards. So some of the bigger homes you see along the lakes, you'll see that they also own the lot across the street to potentially accommodate a larger size.
So maybe that's a loophole we should be closing in our design standards.
I think it's a loophole we just opened, didn't we? Didn't in the last few months, didn't we just pass a non-conforming property?
Non-contiguous lots.
Yeah, non-contiguous lots, which kind of leads to this issue.
We actually I think we started to clarify a little bit better, right? We didn't do any extra restrictions, but we did start to define them more.
Question. So if there is a home on a lake, a medium, small home on a lake, and somebody is trying to make their mortgage, they can rent out a room there in the home that they're living in, and that is considered a bed and breakfast, and that is allowed?
That's allowed as a special land use, and there's some other parameters around it, but yes.
They would have to get permission as a special land use.
If you had a mother-in-law, as long as it's your homestead.
As the property owner has to live there, and I believe Fletcher, you have the regulation.
Yeah, so the home itself needs to be owner occupied. So I think accessory dwelling unit wouldn't adhere to those requirements. You couldn't live outside the primary dwelling, need somebody staying there. And then on top of that, there's parking requirements and appearance requirements for the bed and breakfast. And then it's a 30-day maximum stay.
Over the year, in a year.
In a calendar year. Yep.
For one person or for all?
Just says
Like,
for a
one
guest.
person can only stay 30 days. So that's the length of the one person staying.
Yeah.
So if there's like, let's say there's two buildings on that lot, there's like an outbuilding, two buildings on that lot, that would be considered a bed and breakfast.
No, only if they use the primary. So if you had a primary residence where the owner lived and they were renting a room in that's what he was saying. An accessory dwelling separate where the owner doesn't live would not classify as a bed and breakfast.
I am listening to all the arguments, and I'm so glad we're not making a decision tonight, because I do feel a sense of privilege around this that I'm uncomfortable with. That there are people who need to supplement their income through sharing their spaces and having a more communal approach and collectivist approach. So I'm glad we're not making a decision about it, because there does feel to me to be, and several people kind of talked about it. I know older and more wealthy people feel they've earned their right. They can afford a house on the lake. I too spent my childhood going to a lake rental up in Lake Charlevoix every single year. And I'm glad we're not making a decision tonight, because I feel very, very mixed about it, and have from the beginning. I do feel like there should be a way to allow people to do what they need to do, to use their property the way that they see fit with regulation, because I am concerned about the lakes. My biggest concern would be the environmental stewardship of the lakes. But I don't see that this has to be an either-or issue so far.
When you say it doesn't need to be either or, you mean that it seems like
There could be a
allowable
way.
with some regulation.
There should be a way to help regulate people who own properties on the lake to do this in a reasonable way. That's
So-
where I'm at now, right now. That's great.
I'm just wondering what would be next steps then for us? I mean, what should we do?
Well, first of all, any other questions or discussion from any of the board members, things you want to hear about or want to make sure that we have at the September meeting? We will have our legal counsel here. I've already let them know that they would need to be here for that meeting. So we will have them on site to answer any of those questions. We'll have the planning commission recommendation and all of that legal review done. But what else does the board need or have questions about to make sure that we're ready to make a decision? I do think, I just want to say, I do think that we owe it to the residents that decision has to be made. I mean, it's a tough one. It's a big one. We've been going through this process, like I said, very thoughtfully. I think from the, even, and I don't know how many folks know this, but I'll just say it. Even with picking the members of the committee, typically those committees are, folks volunteer and we name them, and that's how they form. I did interviews with every member of that committee to make sure that we didn't have all 5 people who wanted short-term rentals, all 5 people who didn't want short-term rentals, and made sure that we were very deliberate in that process. And I think this entire process had been deliberative, but to that end, we owe it to everyone to make a determination. So I just want to hear from you all what you need to make sure that we are doing that in September, so that we can give clarity to the issue and to all of the residents. Trustee Dolty.
For me to be able to make a decision in September, I would need to know the financials of enforcement, because I just can't see passing an ordinance that we can't enforce. It's meaningless if we do that. And then if we don't know the impact on our infrastructure here, what it's going to take, how are we going to finance it? How much would each short-term rental owner have to pay on a yearly basis? Do we need a war chest for legality reasons? I don't know. And I think there should be some study in the next month on that issue.
I'm happy to pull together some information and to work with Fletcher and Megan, and I do want to say though that I do believe that it will all be very much an estimate, because I don't know that we could know the scope or the magnitude of the amount of of complaints regardless of which direction we go. I mean, I think the hard part here is that because the township is reactive, it could be that the short-term rental that has operated for 8 years with no complaints continues for another 10 with no complaints. And
Or we
you know,
might have
or it could be that all,
The opposite
it
of-
could be that all 25 that have been listed, we have a complaint the next morning. I mean, it's very, you know, there's no way for us, I think, to predict that.
Bonnie, could
There's
we,
still a process to permitting and everything.
Yeah.
I believe we could decide to move to proactive. So here's a concern I've heard from the public, though nobody brought it up tonight, was that, people feel constrained about making complaints because they don't want to have a bad impact on their neighborly relationships. So I think that it would be allowable for us to decide that we will proactively enforce short-term rentals while we continue to reactively enforce other zoning ordinances. And then I think if you, and I would say, yes, we should do that. And that would mean like regular inspections, basically, you know, so, and I think you could make a cost estimate. Let's say it's say we permit 50 and it's $1,000 license fee each, $50,000, half-time inspector or whatever, who makes, a visit every quarter or whatever and perhaps at random times or something like that, that I think would be more defensible than on a reactive basis where we really can't know. I mean, I agree with you. We can't know with our current policy, but I think I'm going to be coming to the table in September saying, if we do this, I think we should do proactive enforcement. And I think that the program should support the cost of that.
Laura?
I just want to say, that I do think that with the nuisance issues that seem to be a big issue, I do think that I don't love the idea of calling law enforcement all the time, but Alicia, I'm not sure that I agree with you that our sheriff wouldn't come out for our sheriff's deputies that we pay a lot of money to have them surveil would not come out for a 911 call. I don't think I agree with that. And loud noise, I think they might as well. I mean, I've had to call the police numerous times out here, not numerous, but a few times, and they've been very responsive.
And the fire department did also say that they were willing to do a drive-by once a month. If we had 30, that they would drive by once a month to ensure that the external fire codes were still being complied with. And that means people not parking at, so we know that the fire department would also help us with that at no, and that's included in what we already pay for the fire department.
Yeah, don't say no cost. That's, we spend a lot on and rightfully so, on all of our public safety. Alicia, did you?
No, I'm just saying, I'm just gonna say, that's not my experience with the sheriff's department.
Okay.
Oh, that's interesting.
And because I've called in a complaint and they did nothing. And
Huh.
so,
In Dextertown.
yes.
Yeah, I think it's a good, we'll come with as many numbers as we can. I wasn't trying to say that we shouldn't do that. I just, and certainly proactive is a whole other, I mean, I know you said only proactive for short-term rentals, but I think that opens up a whole other policy discussion about, and one that I don't think most residents, I don't think proactive enforcement is necessarily where the public would be for most other issues either. Maybe for short-term rentals. I'm not, yes, yes.
Sense for short-term rentals,
Yes.
it doesn't imply that we need to do it for any other.
Yeah. But yes, we can come. So I've heard numbers. What else will folks need to make sure that we are ready to make a determination in September?
Legal review.
The legal review. Yep.
Comments from the attorney.
All right. Any final questions before we wrap up this portion of the agenda? Or any comments? I want to say to everybody, thank you. I know that it is not easy to step forward. I know that it has put some of the short-term rental owners in a place where they may be here, listening to their neighbors say they don't think they should have them. I know that that makes things really difficult, but local government is messy, and it requires all of us. And so all of you who came here to give comments tonight have showed up at the other meetings. It is important. And I know this board, again, we are very deliberate, and we want to hear from all of you. So know that we will be talking about this again and making a decision in September. You all are obviously welcome at every meeting. I will say we don't usually have to bring out extra chairs, so we'd love to see you again. And we will also be we have another special meeting in August, on Wednesday, August 27th. Is that right? Am I getting the date right?
Wednesday, August 27th.
Yeah, Wednesday, August 27th. We'll be here doing our strategic planning session, which is another special meeting for the board, but that is also open. So if you are interested in coming and helping us go through a revision of the strategic plan, we would invite you to that as well. Any last discussion? If not, we'll move on. There are reports from just a couple of folks in this packet. We will also obviously have the majority of those that will report on our typical issues as a part of the September packet. With no further business, I will adjourn the meeting at 7:41.
And I'll be listening to that meeting.